My stepmom somehow convinced my dying dad to cut me out of his $40 million will, and now I am homeless with a mysterious key. I am sorry, but your father changed his will 2 weeks before he died. You've been disinherited, Riley. The lawyer's words hit me like a physical blow as my stepmother Catherine's lips curled into the faintest smile beside me. Just like that, on a rainy Tuesday morning in a sterile downtown office, I learned that my father's entire $40 million estate, including our family home, the business I'd worked in since college, and every penny to my name now belonged to a woman who'd been in our lives for barely 3 years. That's not possible, I whispered, my fingers gripping the leather armrest until my knuckles turned white. Dad wouldn't do that, Mr. Garrison. Dad's attorney for over 20 years looked genuinely uncomfortable as he adjusted his glasses. I drafted it myself. Riley, your father was quite insistent. Catherine placed her hand on my arm in a gesture of false sympathy, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the fluorescent light. Your father wanted to ensure the business stayed intact. You know how you've always been more creative than business-minded. I jerked away from her touch. I have an MBA from Wharton and increased our Eastern Division profits by 30% last year. Nevertheless, Mr. Garrison interjected, clearing his throat. The will is legally binding. Montgomery Enterprise and all associated assets passed to Catherine with provisions for her daughter Vanessa's future involvement in the company. The mention of my 20-year-old stepsister, who had shown zero interest in the family business beyond using it to fund her social media lifestyle, pushed me over the edge. And what exactly do I get? I asked, already knowing the answer from the pity in Mr. Garrison's eyes. A monthly stipend of $3,000 for the next 5 years to allow you to pursue your other interests. He read from the document, not meeting my gaze. $3,000 a month in New York City. It wouldn't even cover rent for a decent apartment, let alone support the life I'd built, the life I'd earned. When did he sign this? I demanded. The 12th of February, 3 days after his diagnosis, when the doctors had him on those heavy medications that made him confused. When Catherine had insisted on being his sole caregiver, I stood so abruptly my chair tipped backward, crashing against the polished floor. My father was not in his right mind. He was on morphine and barely knew what day it was. Catherine's mask of concern slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculating woman beneath. The witnesses and Mr. Garrison can attest to his mental clarity. Your father wanted peace in his final days, peace. As if she knew the first thing about what my father wanted after 30 years of being his daughter, I'd watched him build Montgomery Underseas from a struggling tech startup to a Fortune 500 company. I'd stayed up late helping him prepare presentations as a teenager. I turned down job offers from Google and Apple to work alongside him. This isn't over, I said, gathering my bag and coat with shaking hands. Catherine sighed dramatically. You are welcome to stay at the house until you find your own place, of course. We're still family. The condescension in her tone made my skin crawl. The house that had been my home since childhood, where every corner held memories of my mother before cancer took her when I was 15. The house that was now legally Catherine's. I'll be by tomorrow to collect my things, I responded coldly. As I reached the door, Mr. Garrison called out, Here's one more thing, Riley. Your father left you this. He held out a small envelope with my name written in my father's distinctive handwriting. I snatched it and left before either of them could see the tears threatening to spill down my cheeks outside. The February rain had turned to sleet, soaking through my wool coat as I walked aimlessly down Park Avenue. My phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications. A text from my best friend Zoe asking how the will reading went. Emails from colleagues wondering when I'd be back at the office. A reminder about my lease renewal due next week. A lease I could no longer afford, a job I no longer had. I ducked into a nearby coffee shop and slid into a corner booth, finally opening the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single key, old and brass, nothing like the modern keys to our house or offices, and a handwritten note. Riley, if you are reading this, things didn't go as I planned. I am sorry, there's more to the story than you know, finned Marcus. The key opens something he'll understand. Trust no one else. Love always, Dad. Marcus Elliott had been my father's business partner in the early days before a falling out led to Marcus leaving to start his own company. Dad had never explained what happened between them, and I hadn't spoken to Marcus in years. My phone rang, Catherine's name flashing on the screen. I declined the call and stared at the key in my palm, a sudden clarity cutting through my grief and shock. My father hadn't abandoned me. He'd left me a message and possibly a way to fight back. The Uber pulled up to the wrought iron gates of my childhood home the next morning. I punched in a security code, half expecting Catherine to have changed it already, but the gates swung open with a familiar creak. The 3-story Georgian mansion looked the same as it always had, meticulously maintained gardens, gleaming windows, the American flag my patriotic father had insisted on flying year-round. Only it wasn't my home anymore. Just an hour, I told the driver, overpaying him to wait. I won't be long. The front door opened before I reached it. Vanessa leaned against the doorframe, examining her freshly manicured nails. At 20, my stepsister looked like a carbon copy of Catherine. Same sleek blonde hair, same calculating blue eyes, same perpetual expression of bored superiority. Mother said you'd be coming by, she drawled, stepping aside. She's out with the interior decorator, something about redecorating the master suite and your old office. I bit back a retort. Less than 24 hours and they were already erasing my father's presence. I am just here for my personal belongings, I said, brushing past her. Just don't take anything that's technically part of the estate. Mother's lawyer made a list. She waved a printed document in my direction before tossing it onto the marble console table. I am heading out. Some of us have actual jobs. By actual jobs, she meant her dread-eyed career posting sponsored content to her 2 million followers. I'd seen her latest brand deal promoting a vitamin supplement that promised to nathify your energy field for the low price of $89.99 per bottle. Fascinating, I muttered, already heading upstairs. My bedroom had been left untouched, a time capsule from high school with swim team trophies and framed photos from graduation. I hadn't lived here full-time since college, keeping an apartment closer to the Montgomery Enterprise offices in Midtown, an apartment I now had to vacate. I packed quickly, filling 2 suitcases with clothes and shoes, and a duffel bag with personal items, photo albums, jewelry that had belonged to my mother, books I couldn't bear to part with. What didn't fit would have to be stored at Zoe's place until I figured out my next move. My father's study was the real destination. I slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind me. The room smelled of leather and my father's sandalwood cologne, and for a moment I could almost believe he would walk in at any moment, greeting me with his usual, what's the word, Birdie, my childhood nickname from a time when I'd insisted on Riley being short for Oriole after watching a baseball game. I moved to his desk, running my fingers over the polished mahogany surface. The computer was gone. Catherine had wasted no time seizing control of company assets, but the built-in bookshelves remained untouched. My eyes scanned the familiar titles, looking for anything that might hold a clue about what my father had wanted me to find. Behind his desk, I noticed something odd, a small gap between 2 of the leather leather-bound first editions he collected. I reached up and found a thin portfolio tucked away, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Inside were documents I'd never seen before, detailed financial records, offshore account numbers, and correspondence with unfamiliar names. Most disturbing was a folder labeled Security Concerns containing what appeared to be surveillance reports on Catherine dating back to before their marriage. My father had been investigating my stepmother. A noise in the hallway made me freeze. Full steps approached, then stopped outside the door. I shoved the portfolio into my duffel bag just as the door swung open. Catherine stood there, impeccably dressed in a cream silk blouse and tailored black pants. Her surprise at finding me seemed genuine. Riley, I thought you'd be gone by now, just finishing up, I said, zipping the duffel closed. She stepped into the room, her gaze sweeping over me in the bag. I hope you're not taking anything that doesn't belong to you, funny. I was thinking the same thing about you in this entire house. Her smile tightened. Your father made his wishes clear. I understand you are upset, but eventually you'll see this was for the best. The business requires a certain approach and understanding of relationships and influence. Is that what you told him when you convinced him to sign that will? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. What did you do, Catherine? Wait until he was drugged and confused? Be very careful, Riley. Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Accusing me of coercing your father is not only disrespectful to his memory but potentially slanderous. I shouldered my bag, meeting her gaze steadily. My father built Montgomery Underseas from nothing. He dedicated his life to that company, to creating something he could pass on to me. Yet here is no way he changed his mind 3 days after being diagnosed with terminal cancer. People have regrets at the end, Riley. Perhaps he realized some of his mistakes. She stepped closer, her expensive perfume cloying. Like trusting you with aspects of the business you weren't ready for. The jab stung precisely because it echoed my own deepest insecurities, that despite my education and hard work, I hadn't lived up to my father's legacy. Or perhaps I countered, he realized the mistake he made marrying you. Her composure slipped for just a second, a flash of raw anger crossing her perfect features before the mask returned. You have until the end of the week to collect the rest of your things. After that, anything left will be donated. I walked past her, pausing at the door. The night before Dad went into the hospital for the last time, did he say anything to you about me or about the business? Something flickered in her eyes, uncertainty or perhaps recognition. He was barely coherent that night. The medication had him confused. A lie. My father had called me that night, his voice weak but lucid. We talked about an upcoming project, one I was now determined to find in the documents I'd taken. Goodbye, Catherine. As I wheeled my suitcases down the driveway to the waiting car, I spotted a sleek black Hemd idling just outside the gates. The driver wore sunglasses despite the overcast day, his attention fixed directly on me. He started the engine as soon as I loaded my bags into the Uber. As we pulled away, the sign fell into place behind us, maintaining a careful distance. I clutched my father's brass key tighter in my pocket. Whatever secrets he'd wanted me to find, someone else might be looking for them too. Marcus Elliott's office was in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, the headquarters of Elliott Innovation Labs. The industrial chic space with its exposed brick and steel beams couldn't have been more different from Montgomery Underseas' sleek midtown tower. Where my father had embraced corporate tradition, Marcus had built his company around disruption. Marcus stood as his assistant showed me in genuine surprise on his weathered face. At 62, he looked older than I remembered. His once dark hair now mostly silver, deep lines etched around his eyes. I am so sorry about Robert. Your father was a brilliant man. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, I said, taking the offered seat. Of course, though I have to admit I was intrigued by your message. You said it was urgent. I placed my father's key on the desk between us. Dad left this for me, along with a note saying I should find you. He said you'd know what it opens. Marcus stared at the key, his expression unreadable. Then he carefully picked it up, turning it over in his palm. I haven't seen this in over 15 years. What is it? He hesitated. Before I answer that, tell me about the will. What did Robert leave you? Nothing, I replied bluntly. He changed his will right after his diagnosis. Everything went to Catherine and provisions for Vanessa's future involvement in the company. Even saying it out loud made my stomach twist. Marcus's eyebrow shot up. That doesn't sound like Robert. He was grooming you to take over since you were in college. Exactly, and now I've been completely cut out. The official story is that he didn't think I was business-minded enough. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Bullshit, Marcus said flatly. Your father bragged about your business acumen to anyone who would listen. He told me your expansion strategy for the Eastern Division was something he wished he'd thought of himself. A lump formed in my throat. My father had never said that to me. I found some documents in his study. I continued, pulling out the portfolio. It looks like he was investigating Catherine before he died. Financial records, surveillance reports. Marcus's face darkened as he flipped through the papers. This confirms what I've suspected for a while. Your father reached out to me about 3 months ago, first contact we'd had in years. He was worried about unusual financial patterns in the company. Large sums moving through shell corporations, investments in companies that didn't seem to exist. Money laundering maybe, or embezzlement. He asked me to look into it quietly, said he was worried someone close to him was involved. I leaned forward. Catherine, he never specified, but he was looking beyond just Catherine, a board member, senior executives. Marcus tapped the portfolio. These shell companies connect to someone named Alexander Voss. Do you know him? I shook my head. Never heard of him. Marcus pulled out his laptop, typing rapidly. Alexander Voss, financial consultant based in Zurich, specializes in wealth management for select clientele. Very exclusive, very private, and somehow connected to Montgomery Underseas' missing money. I murmured. The question is, what was your father planning to do with this information? Marcus studied me. The timing of the new will and his death is concerning Riley. The implication hung in the air between us. If my father had discovered financial crimes within his company and was preparing to expose them, someone had a powerful motive to silence him. His death was ruled natural causes, I said slowly. End-stage pancreatic cancer. The perfect cover, Marcus replied grimly. Who questions when a terminal patient dies? A chill ran through me. You think someone hastened things along? Instead of answering, Marcus opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a small metal box, aged and dented. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a single USB drive and a folded document, a contract dated 17 years earlier, with both my father's and Marcus's signatures. This is the original partnership agreement for Montgomery Elliott Tolling Means, Marcus explained, before your father bought me out and rebranded as Montgomery Underseas. This says you each own 50% of the company, but I always understood you sold your shares to Dad when you left. That's the official story, Marcus agreed. The truth is more complicated. Your father and I had a fundamental disagreement about the direction of the company. He wanted to pursue military contracts. I didn't. Rather than destroy what we'd built with a public fight, we agreed I would step away. But legally, I never sold my shares. My mind raced to catch up. So you still own 50% of Montgomery Underseas? undersized number. When your father married your mother, he transferred 49% of his shares to her, leaving him 1% and me 50%. After your mother died, those shares passed to you in a trust that would fully mature when you turned 30. I stared at him stunned. I own 49% of Montgomery Entities according to this agreement. Yes, your father was the public face of the company, but legally the majority ownership was split between me and your trust. Catherine's claim on the company through the new will is only to your father's 1%. He handed me the USB drive. This contains digital copies of all the legal documents, including your mother's trust. Robert wanted to make sure they couldn't be destroyed or altered. Tears pricked at my eyes. My father had protected me after all. Why the secrecy? Why not just tell me? Marcus sighed. Robert was always playing the long game, I guess. He suspected someone was after the company and wanted to see how far they would go without revealing this failsafe. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We need to talk about your father. Miami at Riverside Park, 79th, St. Entrance, 7 p.m. Come alone. I showed it to Marcus, who frowned. Could be a trap, or someone else who knows what was happening at Montgomery Industries, I countered. Either way, I need to find out. Marcus studied me for a long moment. You are just like your father, too stubborn to back down from a fight. He pulled a business card from his desk and scribbled something on the back. This is my private number. If you are not in contact by 8 p.m., I am calling the police. As I left Elliott Innovation Pull-ups, I noticed the black Hymd parked across the street. The driver was gone, but a parking ticket fluttered under the windshield wiper. They'd been there at least an hour, watching me, waiting. Whatever game Catherine was playing, she wasn't the only player. I arrived at Riverside Park 20 minutes early, choosing a bench with clear sight lines in all directions. The February evening was cold but clear, the Hudson River reflecting the last orange streaks of sunset. Joggers and dog walkers passed by, none paying any special attention to me. At exactly 7 p.m., a tall man in a camel overcoat approached his gate, deliberate, purposeful. He sat beside me without asking permission, his gaze fixed on the river. You look like him, he said finally. Robert had the same way of watching everything, cataloging details. I studied him. Sidelong, mid-30s, dark hair cut short, expensive watch partially visible beneath his cuff. You knew my father? I worked with him. Richard Kane, Montgomery Undersized Security Division. The name was vaguely familiar. He nodded. I've been trying to reach you since the funeral, but your stepmother has been monitoring communications. What do you want to finish? But your father started. Kane finally turned to face me. He hired me 6 months ago to conduct an internal investigation off the books, reporting directly to him. Catherine Montgomery and certain board members were redirecting company funds through a series of shell corporations. Your father was building a case to present to the FBI. My hands tightened around the strap of my bag where Marcus's documents and the USB drive were safely stored. Do you have proof? Some, not enough for a criminal case yet. His eyes narrowed slightly. But I think you found something in his study yesterday. The portfolio that was hidden behind his first editions. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the February air. You've been watching me, protecting you, he corrected. Your father's last instruction to me was to keep you safe. After what happened to him, I took that seriously. What exactly happened to him? I asked, voicing the question that had been haunting me since my meeting with Marcus. Kane's expression hardened. The cancer was real, but his decline was accelerated. His last 3 prescriptions were tampered with higher doses than what his doctor ordered. Bennett, to weaken his heart while making it look natural. Murdered. The word hung unspoken between us. And you think Catherine? I think Catherine is the face, Kane interrupted. But someone else is pulling the strings. A financial consultant named Alexander Voss has been meeting regularly with Catherine and 3 board members. The same boss connected to the shell corporations, the same name Marcus had mentioned, because I need access to whatever was in that portfolio, and because Montgomery Undersized quarterly board meeting is on Friday. Catherine is planning to announce a merger with Criterion Global, a deal that would effectively hide all traces of the embezzlement while making her and her partners very rich. 3 days. I had 3 days to stop her. I need to think, I said, standing. If what you are saying is true, it is. Kane rose as well, towering over me. Your father trusted you, Riley. He told me you were the only one who could see this through if something happened to him. I'll be in touch, I promised, already walking away. Trust no one else, my father's note had warned. I wasn't about to ignore that advice for a man I just met, no matter how convincing his story. I took a circuitous route back to Zoe's apartment where I'd been staying since leaving my family home. Based, I thought I spotted the black Hymd, but it disappeared each time I tried to confirm paranoia or justified caution. I couldn't tell anymore. Zoe was waiting with that takeout and a worried expression. You look like hell, Ree. What happened with Marcus? I collapsed onto her sofa, suddenly exhausted. It's complicated, potentially illegal, possibly dangerous. So Tuesday, she quipped, attempting to lighten the mood. Zoe had been my best friend since boarding school, the wild to my cautious, the spontaneous to my planned. She worked as a digital marketing director for a startup, lived in a perpetually cluttered apartment in Chelsea, and was the most loyal person I knew. Catherine may have killed my father, I said bluntly. Zoe's smile vanished. Hi me. I told her everything. The will, the documents, my meetings with Marcus and Kane. By the time I finished, the food was cold and Zoe was pacing her small living room. You need to go to the police, she insisted. With what evidence? Financial records that I technically stole, the word of my father's estranged business partner and a security consultant I just met. No, think I am a disgruntled daughter making wild accusations because I didn't get my inheritance. Zoe stopped pacing. So what's your plan? I need to get into Montgomery Enterprise, access the company servers, and find concrete proof before the board meeting on Friday. I rubbed my temples, a headache forming, but Catherine has probably already revoked my access. Not necessarily, Zoe countered, retrieving her laptop. Let me check something. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. After a moment, she turned the screen toward me. Your company profile is still active. According to the system, you are on bereavement leave, not terminated. Catherine's mistake, I murmured, leaning closer to the screen. Or her arrogance, Zoe suggested. She may not see you as a threat. An idea began to form, dangerous, but potentially effective. I need to make her believe that I have accepted what happened, that I'm moving on. The next morning, I swallowed my pride and called Catherine. Riley, she answered, surprise evident in her voice. I didn't expect to hear from you. I've been thinking about what she said, I replied, infusing my voice with just the right amount of dejection. About Dad's wishes, I may not agree with his decision, but I have to respect it. A pause. That's very mature of you. I'd like to come back to work next week. Not as an executive, obviously, but maybe in product development. I have some ideas I think could be valuable. Another longer pause. I could almost hear her calculating the risks and benefits of keeping me close versus cutting me loose. Of course, she finally said, her tone warming with false sincerity. We're still family, Riley. I never wanted to push you out of the company entirely. Thank you. I appreciate that I forced the words past gritted teeth. In fact, Catherine continued, we're having a small dinner party tomorrow night. Just a few few board members and key investors. You should come. It would be a good opportunity to smooth things over, show there are no hard feelings. Perfect. I'd like that. Excellent. I've been meaning to introduce you to someone, Alexander Voss. He's a brilliant financial consultant who's been working with us recently. I think you two would hit it off. My heart raced. Catherine was handing me direct access to the man at the center of the embezzlement scheme. More interesting. Tomorrow at 8 then. The house. I ended the call and looked at Zoe, who had been listening. I'm having dinner with the enemy and her co-conspirators. Zoe added, looking worried. Are you sure this is a good idea? No, I admitted. But it's the only one I've got. Catherine's dinner party was a strategic affair, just 10 guests seated around the formal dining table where my father had hosted countless business discussions. I recognized most of the faces. 3 board members, 2 major investors, and Catherine's personal attorney. The newcomers were Alexander Voss and his associate, a hawk-faced woman introduced only as Miss Leanne. Riley, darling, Catherine greeted me with air kisses. She was playing the role of gracious stepmother, perfectly dressed in a tasteful black dress, with a single strand of pearls appropriately subdued for a recent widow. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed her performance. I wouldn't miss it, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. She steered me toward Voss, a trim man in his 40s with the polished appearance of someone who spent other people's money for a living. Alexander, this is Robert's daughter, Riley. Riley Alexander has been instrumental in some exciting new directions for Montgomery and Dirtis. Voss took my hand, his grip lingering a beat too long. A pleasure. Catherine speaks highly of your intelligence, though she mentioned you might be pursuing other opportunities now. Translation. Catherine had told him I was being pushed out. I am keeping my options open, I replied carefully. But Montgomery and Dirtis will always be special to me. Family businesses often are, Voss said smoothly, though sometimes the next generation needs to accept when it's time for new leadership. I maintained my smile with effort. Change can be difficult, but necessary. I am still learning that lesson. Voss seemed satisfied with my apparent submission. Perhaps we could discuss your future plans sometime. I have connections in several industries that might interest someone with your background. I'd like that, I lied. Throughout dinner I played the part Catherine expected, somewhat subdued, occasionally wistful about my father, but ultimately accepting of my diminished role. All the while I observed the dynamics around the table, noting who deferred to whom, who shared knowing glances during discussions of the upcoming merger. Board member Howard Tanner was clearly in Catherine's inner circle, while Janet Fletcher seemed uncomfortable, especially when the Criterion Global merger was mentioned. The investors were largely sycophantic, eager to please Voss, who despite his consultant title, appeared to be driving the conversation. After the main course, Catherine clinked her glass. Since we're all friends here, I thought we might pre-brew some details of Friday's announcement. Voss nodded his approval and Catherine continued. Criterion Global's offer has been finalized at $180 minus per share, a 30% premium over current market value. Murmurs of appreciation circled the table. Montgomery Underseas stock had been trading around $140 recently. The merger would represent a significant windfall for shareholders. The structure will allow us to maintain the Montgomery name as a division while integrating our operations with Criterion's global platform, Catherine explained. Most importantly, it secures our future against certain challenges the company has faced recently. Her gaze flickered to me momentarily, a subtle warning I was meant to catch. What challenges would those be? I asked innocently. An awkward silence fell over the table. Market headwinds, regulatory pressures, the usual concerns for a company of our size, Howard Tanner interjected smoothly. Nothing specific? Of course I nodded, though I was reviewing some of the Eastern Division reports yesterday and noticed some unusual allocations, probably just accounting updates I am not familiar with. Catherine's smile froze. You've been reviewing company reports, just catching up before returning to work, I said lightly. My access is still active. I assumed that was intentional. Voss and Catherine exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Perhaps this isn't the appropriate setting for operational details, Voss suggested wryly. Why don't you join me for a brandy in the study? I'd love to hear more about your experience with the Eastern Division. A trap, obviously, but one I needed to spring if I wanted to understand what they were planning. I'd be delighted, I replied. In my father's study now, stripped of his personal touches, the leather-bound books replaced with Catherine's modern art. Voss poured 2 sifters of expensive brandy. You know, Riley, intelligence can be a double-edged sword, he began, handing me a glass. Your father was brilliant, but he sometimes saw patterns where none existed. A common trait in self-made men, they can become paranoid about protecting what they've built. I sipped the brandy, watching him over the rim. Is that what happened to him? Paranoia, in a manner of speaking. Voss settled into what had been my father's chair. He began asking questions about standard financial practices, making accusations. Concerning enough to change his will and cut me out? I asked directly. Voss's smile didn't waver. It was his decision, not mine, though I did advise Catherine that consolidating control would be beneficial for the company's future, and the merger with Criterion, was that your idea too? A logical step. Montgomery Industries needs capital and global reach. Criterion needs your technology patents and U.S. market presence. He leaned forward. The question is, where do you fit in this new arrangement? I was hoping you could tell me, I replied. Since you seem to be making all the decisions now, his eyes hardened slightly. Be careful, Riley. Catherine may feel a sentimental obligation toward you, but I am more pragmatic. You still have a future if you choose wisely. Before I could respond, the door opened and Catherine entered with Miss Liang, who closed the door firmly behind them. Is she being reasonable? Catherine asked. Boss, we're still discussing options, he replied, not taking his eyes off me. Catherine sighed dramatically. Accepting private financial records, downlining confidential board materials, given your emotional state after your father's death. We're willing to overlook potential corporate espionage charges in exchange for what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sign a non-disclosure agreement tonight. Accept a generous severance package and walk away from Montgomery Industries permanently, Miss Liang stated, producing documents from her sleek briefcase. And if I refuse, then things become unpleasant.